Beth Gardner is here again. Beth Gardner too. What's going on, Beth?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on again. So just a little recap for anyone who didn't see the first episode you were on. You are a life coach who works with non-addicts, so people, not the addicts, but the people around the addicts. And you also work with cancer patients, people who currently have cancer. Correct?
Correct, or those that are heading towards remission. So, and even people after the remission stage. But that remission stage is so critical to really weed through some of the deep-rooted problems that could be associated with the cancer.
Right. That's really awesome. So I wanted to have you on today and just kind of do a little deeper dive with your experience working with non-addicts, because I know it's such a common thing, like addiction. And I personally, in my own life, I've known people that have had addiction, currently have addiction, and I've known a lot of people that have family members who do. And I think just understanding how to take steps when you're in that situation, when someone you love or maybe you're close to is an addict, and sort of the steps you can take to help them and help yourself. So we can jump right into that. First, maybe let's just jump. If you would share just a little bit about like why this was something you got into in the first place.
Sure. Well, as I explained before in my previous podcast with you and with other ones, I don't believe that anyone comes into this world, into a human body wanting to have that addictive gene, whether it's addiction to substance abuse, whether it's addiction to shopping, to hoarding, whatever the addiction is. I don't believe that people want to come in and live that sort of challenging lifestyle. Now, that being said, Caroline Myth has written a book called Anatomy of Spirit, and there it discusses that people have original contracts, spirit contracts, before we come in to this world, and they're part of lessons that we're supposed to be learned. So there are people that would disagree with me, but for the most part, if I knew prior to coming in to this life that I was going to be faced with certain challenges that I have been, particularly with the cancer, I may not have wanted to come in.
But it passed on that. When it's a hard pass, I'll stay here wherever I am. I'll stay here.
Everyone comes in with it is dealt a certain hand, right? It's a common term.
Yeah.
And I know throughout my life there have been times that I've held my heavy hand. And I've thought to myself, well, I'd love to trade in this card for something more positive.
Right.
So, by saying that, what I'm ultimately saying to any addicts that are out there is I'm not judging, because from working, with those that have addiction and those that don't, what I'm finding is there are so many parallels between the two reasons that one is struggling with addiction and one is being the codependent or enabler of an addiction. There are just so many similar deep-rooted issues.
Yeah, right? That makes a lot of sense.
And from having grown up in an environment where a lot of my teachers in junior high and high school, or coaches, or the world I was surrounded by, were a lot of people that had been in the military. So they had fought in World War II, Vietnam War, Korean War, yada yada yada. And if you speak with any people that have fought in those worlds, when they weren't in combat or they weren't on the base, they didn't really have anything else to do, which is really a shame. You think about it, for young men and women to be stationed somewhere, and then on their free time they don't really have much to do but go to a bar and drink. That's their social life. So no wonder people came back with addiction problems. That I don't always associate with a genetic lineage. Just because you're Irish doesn't mean you're going to become an addict, an alcoholic. So again, I'm looking at it from a very Libra point of view, right? Very open-minded, that I'm not judging these a lot of them didn't have anything better to do. They're going through trauma because they're having to either fight or at least be in a base where the war is going on. I mean, how traumatizing is that?
Mhm.
You need an outlet. So that drinking was their outlet. So
Yeah, I mean, you got to imagine like the trauma would be a big piece of it, right? Like if you're seeing your best friend die in front of you, people dying around you all the time, killing other people, then you go back to the base and there's a bar there, and you know, I think the big key with addiction, and you're kind of pointing to it, how non-addicts and addicts have the same kind of problems, would be that oftentimes we look for something to fill a void, you know, and sometimes it ends up being substances.
and unfortunate, all the more unfortunate, it's already in their DNA. So it's
Mm,
related, you know.
yeah,
It was predestined in their DNA that there would be a chance, just like any type of mental illness, whether it's, clinical depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, inheriting brown eyes versus green eyes. It's just in the DNA. So it's inevitable to come up. So it's just really unfortunate on both sides. So just having been around it all my life, I have always been on the other side of it, but not knowing the negative side effects that were affecting me from it, from dealing with shaming issues to guilt issues that were bestowed onto me by an addict, leaders, people that I was looking up to, not being able to think necessarily as freely, not being able to express my feelings, but learning really how to repress them and push them so deep that they manifest into something like a cancer, right?
mm,
Um, it was just from that experience, and it was from actually getting that cancer diagnosis back when I was 30, 1 month after turning the age of 30, that I realized, wait a minute, this doesn't run in the gene pool. It was non-genetic. So how did I get this? So it was from the research I had done through reading Caroline Myss, the late Caroline Myss, her books, and a number of other ones on codependency and addiction and everything of that nature. And I mean, I can send you links to all these books, but I mean, I've just done research all the way back then. And I realized that it was part of the reason was not only because of having a lot of stress in my life, but was because of being around that sort of toxic environment. And there was no way to get away from it because, again, it was just part of the culture. You know,
yeah,
I grew up during a time where people were still smoking, and it wasn't necessarily looked badly upon. You just thought, oh, that person smoked. Just better just stay away from it. That's all.
I can
So it wasn't
remember
out the
being a
norm.
kid and there'd be smoking sections in restaurants and stuff.
Right. Right. So, it's all perspective. So that's kind of how that got started. So once I realized from my own, in order to survive the cancer and survive that diagnosis stage 3, I needed to figure out the root of what was going on. And from reaching out to professionals, as well as doing a lot of active reading, including going to libraries, I started to pull those deep-seated roots that I didn't even know exist.
Right.
I didn't realize the depth of what they were there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would have run the risk of having the reoccurrence. Because the name of the game when you're diagnosed with cancer is to survive it and make sure it doesn't come back.
Yeah.
Because when it comes back with a vengeance, mostly.
Right. That makes sense. So just jumping to today, the work that you do with non-addicts, and again, I think it's a really important group of people to work with. I think they need a lot of help, but where do you start, and what are the biggest things that you start to work on?
Well, one of the brings I start to work on is teaching the non-addict exactly how to create boundaries. And one of the reasons why I stress that and find multiple ways to, dependent on the individual, and teaching them how to create boundaries was because when I was looking for professional help myself, psychiatrists, psychologists, in a large metropolitan city, they were all licensed to work with addicts, but they weren't licensed to work with people on the other side. And all I was looking
Mm,
for was a roadmap.
right.
I'm someone that can read a book, give me a manual, and I'll figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Send me the manual for IKEA furniture, and I'll figure out how to put it together. I just need someone a sounding board, a not confidential, non-judgmental sounding board to
Yeah.
listen to me what I'm doing, to help change my thinking so that I became more self-aware of myself and how I was contributing to being in those environments, because I saw it as something that I had done. And it wasn't blaming the addict. I'm like, wait, now I gotta look at myself. Let's show the mirror to myself and say, self, what do you need to change in your life? But I had to figure that out on my own, unfortunately, which is why I do the coaching. So setting the boundaries is first and foremost, because by setting the boundary, you are then ultimately protecting yourself. Even though you might have been trained to protect and care for the addict, ultimately you really need to protect yourself. And it's better for the addict. It's a win-win on both sides. So by setting boundaries, I go to the extent of blocking someone's phone number at work. Pre-pandemic, I was known for doing it. Because if I'm at work and I have a lot of responsibility, I do not need exterior distraction. I don't even want to hear other family members calling into the office to complain about something to their family, because that's just a distraction. I'm being paid to work and to do my job, whether it's trading, working in the investment industry, whether it's nonprofit corporate work for cancer organizations. It's not fair to the employer who's paying me, and it's not fair to me either, because I need to get the work done, and I have projects that need to get completed at a specific time. So you set the boundaries, like, for example, calling the IT department saying, I need you to block these phone numbers so this person never calls me at work. And then you block their email address. Then another thing I've done on my cell phone is, instead of having their actual name there, Maddie, I will change it to say, do not respond,
Okay.
or send to voicemail. So that when I see that name, that number pop up with that command to me, tells me exactly what I need. So again, I'm setting up a boundary. So
So just to
immediately
be sorry.
that message, that person calling in, is going right to voice.
Right.
So my heartstrings don't get pulled, and I don't get sucked into saying hello.
Mm,
And all of a sudden
yeah.
I'm being drawn in.
Yeah. So
Does
just
that
to be
make sense?
clear, sort of in context and like a situation. So like, say someone close to you is an addict. Would you recommend this? Like, at what point would you recommend this? Like, say, uh, like if they're a friend, or like, if would you recommend that if they're a family member and they're calling you all the time, and it's like this thing where they're kind of like just constantly in your life trying to take, or like, would you recommend this just kind of, maybe they're not in that situation? Like, what's the pre-frame for blocking their number? Or yeah.
It's another thing that I have to explain and teach to them is, what are they feeling? So if you feel drained, if you're feeling manipulated, if you're feeling shamed, if it's becoming annoying, you do it. If it's a violation of your personal space, whether you're at home or at work or just out and about, as you Canadians say,
Boot in the
out
boot.
out and about,
Boot in the boot, eh?
enjoying the day. It's your right as a spiritual being to determine who can contact you and who cannot, and when they
Okay.
I've
Okay.
had people where I've said, you can only contact me by email. And that's the ultimate control in your part, because
Yeah.
you cannot, when you read it, then you're not having to immediately respond. You can then, take a couple breaths, because all the emotions, the negative emotions, are going to conjure up from just reading one sentence, even if it's
Yeah.
something polite. So that's I've done that, but you have to, particularly in this day and age with social, not block
Yeah.
people on social. I have no qualms about it. I just can't be bothered. I
Hmm.
cannot deal with the need. I don't play needy. So people that are really needy, but I also grew up in a generation and time frame that I wouldn't call my father unless it was literally a 911 situation.
Yeah.
But looking back, I would have had them the hospital call. Like we just didn't do that anyway. It's just not socially acceptable. So, it's one way that I do it. You control it. You control it on your phone.
Hmm. Right. That makes sense. Yeah, I think like the energy draining thing and manipulation.
If you don't
That's
feel excited about the person contacting you, you need to stop for a minute and ask yourself why. Don't even pick up the phone. Ask yourself, why do I really want to deal with this person? Is this the
yeah,
right time? Do I actually like this person, but it's just not the right time? You need to call them back another time.
yeah,
You need to talk to yourself first,
yeah,
because that's when you're protecting yourself and setting that boundary, and you're also then sending them a signal.
mm,
You can't be played with. You're
yeah.
not being amiable. But the phone is the big thing. Phone and social, obviously, in this day and age.
I think so too. Like I think like the whole sending the signal thing, like I think like where people get caught up, and you're saying like set the boundary, which is the reason why that's hard is because people get caught up in like, maybe they love this person. Maybe it's a really close friend, maybe it's a relation like a partner, or maybe it's like a parent or a sibling, whatever it is. But you get caught up in like, I want to help this person. And then you just kind of like, but if you let them manipulate or take your energy, they just will.
Right.
So
Because at the end of the day, let me explain this to you. It's one thing that they'll know about you is you have the energy and power that they don't. They're struggling.
mhm,
They're in a lot of pain. People that are hurting, whether they realize it or not, will hurt other people
yeah,
subconsciously, right? They're hurting.
mm,
They're in pain. So they see you as a powerful source. They know exactly what words to use, the tone of voice to use. Matt,
yeah,
I'm going to call you, and this is what I need, and woe is me. They know exactly what phrases to use because they are um, they're such masters of manipulating. They know what strings to point, and it's all the more challenging when it's someone that's close to you, whether it's DNA related or and someone you've known throughout your life. Um, they're hurting and they're coming to you, but what they need to learn is that they can't come because it's hurting you. It's 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 inevitably hurting. They need to get professional help.
yeah,
That's why there are so many people that are licensed. Like I said in my last podcast, you can go to an exotic location and get clean. I'm like, well, if
yeah,
I didn't have that problem, I would be there in an exotic
yeah,
location. And I don't
yeah,
know if I'd come back because
yeah,
I probably enjoy myself in the new
yeah, yeah,
environment.
yeah,
So, they are not, and another good book I recommend people read, and it's a challenging one to read. It's called People of the Lie, by Scott Peck. I couldn't even it took me a while to wrap my head around that there are people that actually think this way, and this goes in deep into manipulation and the different ways people will con one.
mm,
And it took me a while to get through it because I had to put it down because it's heavy, it was draining,
yeah,
and my head doesn't think this way. I'm a straight shooter,
yeah.
uh, logical individual, but I had to teach myself, train my mind to listen to those people that were
Do you think like you mentioned like people are in pain and they will like inflict pain on others, um and like even if it's like not conscious, like subconscious. Do you think a lot of it is, I mean, some of it clear, like, there's always going to be a spectrum, but like, I think for the average addict, it's like subconscious, like they're just not, like, I've talked to a lot of them on here on this podcast, and something that, like, common thing they say is like, that have went through it and stuff, that like I was so wrapped up in my addiction that I would just say anything at all to get to the drug or get to the alcohol. It was like, it wasn't even me. It was like I would just say anything just to, like, that was the only thing on my mind. It was like one track mind. Say anything or do anything to get to that.
So your question was, do they realize how much pain they're in?
Did you think sorry, do you think it's do you think it's subconscious for the most part, or like
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's
they're not conscious of the pain they're inflicting on others, or they don't think about it because they're so wrapped up in what they're doing?
they can't, because it's almost a narcissistic behavioral pattern that
Yeah,
at certain points is so deeply embedded in our lower brainstem by that.
yeah,
They don't
yeah,
know. It's all they know.
yeah,
And at the end of the day, you are right. What matters is that they're going to look forward to that substance, whatever their choice of poison is.
yeah.
And so they look for survival purposes. They look for the person that's going to feel sorry for them, or that's going to help them to get
Mhm.
to that substance,
Yeah,
or give them that high that they're looking for.
yeah,
Yeah, it's they don't know it. They don't know it. And if you recall my podcast with you, I had spent time going to Al-Anon meetings, and then I went to AA meetings. I just went
yeah,
in there. I wanted to see the difference.
yeah,
And the people in the AA were just relieved to have that monkey, so to speak, off their back. And we're
yeah,
talking about plans that they were looking forward to in their life, and it was very supportive. And the
mhm,
energy level was much higher than the Al-Anon, where I just felt like
mhm.
people had just been run over.
Yeah, defeated, I imagine, like helpless in the
Right,
situation, right?
right. So
Because
yeah,
ultimately, like they say all the time, it's like the addict has to make their own decision to stop. So you can like tire yourself out trying to help them. But that's really like, and then we'll get into what's next after boundaries, but that's really where I think people struggle. That's where I've struggled in my life. And I actually lost a friend, and I set boundaries like for years, but like, how do you help? Like, what do you do? Like, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, can you help, or
they
do you
don't.
just, or you
They
just
have to
don't?
get professional help. You're not licensed to do it. Like
Yeah,
when I
it's like,
had,
how do you get them there?
they have to find their way on their own.
Mm,
It is tough love. They have to figure it out on their own. You have to
mm,
tell them you need to get help, and you need to do it on your own. You can't go in there with I don't advise, because again, you're then putting yourself at risk. It's like if someone needs any type of surgery, you're not
yeah,
doing it for them. When
yeah.
I had to go through 2 rounds of chemotherapy, I didn't call someone up one day, a girlfriend, and say, you know what, I don't feel like going today. Do you mind taking it for me?
It's really fun. You're gonna love it.
Just wait till you get all that Benadryl. You'll be knocked right out.
After the first one, it's like nothing.
Exactly. I said, I just don't feel like it. Yeah, they have to do it on their own. And that's what the
Yeah.
non-addict has to realize is
Mm,
this is not in their, this is not their responsibility.
yeah. What's your opinion on interventions?
They have to be carefully done
Yeah,
with everyone in the right mindset to do it. But they
yeah.
have to be done through love,
Hmm.
not through attack.
Hmm.
And I don't know if they always work. Again,
Hmm.
that's putting the non-addict, it's asking a lot of the non-addict.
Yeah, for
They
sure.
have to be careful. I believe public figure Nicole Kidwin did one for her husband, because soon after they were married, and she realized he was an addict.
Hmm.
And there was some sort of method that she did, but I know she used the approach of love, but it was done. Now, her father, who's passed, was a psychologist, so he probably would have definitely had an effective method. But
Yeah.
I don't recommend them unless you speak to a professional about how to do it. So you want to speak to a psychiatrist or something.
Yeah. You want to know exactly how to do it. Maybe even like if you can have the professional there. It's kind of a sketchy thing because then they feel like, I imagine they would feel like attacked because there's a random person wherever you end up doing it. But um yeah, like getting professional help. Like I think the worst thing you could do is just try to do it on your own and just make it up or
Yeah,
just do what you
I
think is
don't.
right.
It's like someone putting a gun to your head and trying to talk them out of it. I
Yeah.
don't. I would not put. I want anyone to put that upon themselves.
Yeah.
Again, you know, the addict needs to learn that it's their problem and situation
Yeah.
that they have to deal with,
Hmm.
and they need to figure it out.
So boundaries is usually the first thing that you work on.
And all the different ways to set boundaries, because many people are not accustomed to doing it, and not accustomed to doing the extreme that needs to be done. Right?
Yes.
Contacting the local police saying this individual is not allowed in the neighborhood at any point in time. And I'll be honest with you, they appreciate notification of that in advance rather than have a situation escalate and the person that you don't want around anymore coming to the house and all of a sudden drama takes place.
Hmm.
Um, Police officers, men and women, would appreciate notification in advance, and they will see to it that person keeps their distance. Because you have to set boundaries like that, some dependent on the severity.
Right. And what, yeah. And what would you recommend for like a friend? Like maybe a friend that's not that close, or maybe they are close, and it's like they're not necessarily draining energy from you, but um, you can see what's happening. Would it just with boundaries? Would it be the same thing?
Boundaries, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's no crime in saying to someone, excuse me, in a caring method, have you thought about getting some professional help?
Mhm.
Because then you can tell whether or not the person really realizes the severity of their situation or not.
Yeah,
If they're on the fence about it, then don't waste your time. And,
yeah,
and it seems very cold, but you need to look at yourself. This is not fair to the non-addict. It's not fair to their lives, their families' lives.
hmm,
It's not fair to a healthy individual. It's
hmm,
like taking gasoline and just throwing it at the individual. It's toxic.
hmm,
It's not fair to. It's not fair to you.
hmm,
We are in. We are spiritual beings. We have spiritual rights and how we choose to live our life.
hmm.
Um, it's like I'm hearing Britney Spears with an IUD. I'm like, my God, how the poor woman, she can't even choose to have more of a family or not. Yet she's a spiritual individual. At some point, unless there's something more psychologically going on there than we don't know about, that no one will know about except the psychiatrist. There's a woman who, is a spiritual being, regardless of her religious preferences, and she can't even get married and have a child, another
Hmm.
child. That, so you need to really, I say it over and over again, people need to set boundaries because you need to protect yourself. You don't realize just how toxic it is, how much it wears away at an individual's, not just their psyche, but it can affect them physically, making them sick.
Yeah, and I think when you do set boundaries, you realize that.
And you tune into your own feelings. It's like
Mm.
being out in this dreaded heat. I was out too long on Saturday. And I was out on a walk and I had to walk home and I was like, oh, I'm really struggling. I'm gonna have to sit down on someone's sidewalk in order to just regroup because I didn't realize how much I was really pushing my body. So I was just enjoying the fact that we're getting clear of this pandemic and I was out enjoying a walk. And I didn't realize just how hot it was. I read it on the news, but I wasn't listening to my body.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even bring water with me. I'm like, what were you thinking? So you can, the point is you can go on and on in life to the point that you don't realize it's how detrimental, how much it's affecting you.
Yeah.
I go back to my experience with work. I don't want anyone's family members calling in and screaming to their family members because again, they're interrupting my work environment as well. It's not fair.
Yeah. I understand for
You
sure.
need to protect your own energy.
No. Yeah. 100%. You're right. What would be like the next thing you might work on? The boundaries would be the big one, it sounds like. And what would be the next
Then once
thing?
you've established those boundaries, then they very much need to learn. And I just was, conversationally talking with this for you, they need to tune into their own needs. What's interesting is many of them have spent so much time helping the addict, they've let go of their own personal needs. Basic.
Mhm.
They're not listening to their heartbeat. They're not paying attention that their blood pressure is elevated, that they're sweating, uncomfortable, because they've been in that state so long that they think it's normal. So what then I'm train them to do is find out what their needs are in life, what their ambitions are, what they've been wanting to do, what they haven't been able to do, to really get into
Mhm.
their head for them to focus on themselves. And it's going to feel narcissistic and it does have a negative connotation in our, you know, environment, but sometimes you have to be self-focused and love
Mhm.
yourself.
Mhm. No, I think you're 100% right.
You need to tune in, person needs to tune in to their own needs and wants, and once they've set those boundaries and continue to set boundaries. Because what they
Mhm.
may find is there's so much of their needs not being met that they need to even further extend boundaries.
Yeah.
Like I said, contact local police for
Yeah.
protection. And that's what they're there for.
Yeah. Yeah. I
At
think.
the workplace, let the security guard at the building that you work at know.
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
actually appreciate that because they're there to make sure that nothing dramatic happens.
Mhm.
So by
Yeah.
them being on alert, you know,
They're aware of it already. Instead of getting surprised someday.
right.
Um, yeah, I think you're 100% right there. Like focusing on your own needs and like filling up your own cup. Like when you really look inward and yeah, it just makes a lot of sense. Like you can be so wrapped up in other people's problems and that energy draining and everything that you don't even know. You lose yourself in it, like you said, like all your basic needs go out. You don't pay attention to what you need anymore or how you are even happy. You're just so focused on this other person, this other person's struggle. So that makes a lot of sense.
And at the end of the day, I mean, let's look at it even more logically from a spiritual standpoint. This is not what the divine, God, the universe, however you choose to look at it. This is not what we are here on earth for. We are all given individual gifts and
Hmm.
we're here to live out that mission.
Hmm.
So if someone's getting in the way of something that divinely I'm here to do,
Hmm.
they're out. I have to sit
Hmm.
down because they're interrupting not just me physically, emotionally, psychologically, but they're interrupting what's my purpose is.
Hmm.
That's just a waste
Yeah.
of life, time.
Yeah.
It's so precious, and we know that all the more with this pandemic. It's so precious. It can
Yeah.
be gone, 20 years flies by in a snap.
Hmm.
When I say to people, I'm 20 years out of cancer, I think, my God, that flew by. It's hell, but
Hmm.
man, it flew by. It goes by.
Hmm.
So you know, there's no shame and it's nothing wrong with focusing on your needs.
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean, my hat really goes off to these caretakers or the nurses or providers, for example, at assisted living, where I go and visit my father. Every time I go in there with food for them, not just for him,
Yeah.
because I get it.
Hmm.
And they've been working through the pandemic.
Hmm.
I can't
Yeah.
imagine how drained they are, but I can see it. I can certainly see it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very commendable work. And I mean, like even what you're doing, and I do the same thing, like being a coach, like we're doing the same kind of thing where it's like our purpose is actually to help other people do their purpose, So
Right. But I make sure I set up the boundary.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I listen to my intuition. I listen to my gut,
Mm-hmm.
which many people are not trained to do. For me,
Mm-hmm.
it comes naturally, but people need to listen to their intuition, gut, which they may have lost track.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. That's something I've really tapped into over the last like year or so. Um, and something I'd like to learn more about. But I think like looking back at my own life, I mean, it's just my own experience, and I'll share it. Like every time I've went against my gut feeling, it turned out horrible. And every time I go with it, even if it doesn't seem like the right thing logically at the time, it's like it was the right thing to do in the end. And it's when you start looking into the subconscious mind and how much of our brain is subconscious, like there's something else going on there. And if you have a feeling, it's probably intuition about something. It's probably correct.
Yeah, I mean, it could actually too be from God, divine, the universe, or whatever. I mean, I know I
Yeah.
just from
Yeah.
my own nature, um, have been so cautious at times that I'm perceived as stubborn, but I'm really just, that Libra in me, I'm balancing. Is this great to do? How does this feel in my gut? And I'll take time to sit back and double check it in my own energy. Does this feel right or is this feel wrong? Particularly the bigger decisions, because if you make one wrong decision in life, it's worse than taking the wrong exit on the highway.
Yeah.
At least in the United States, you've got about 20 minutes to find another exit and turn around. You take a wrong path in life, and regardless of how much the universe sends you signals that no, abort, exit here, turn around,
Yeah.
it can wreak havoc on your entire life. The original
For
plan,
sure.
go ahead.
Got to go off-roading for a bit. Yeah, find the highway,
Pull over to the shoulder. Run
Yeah.
your hazards.
Well, you have to swim across a lake or something. Get back to the right side of the pond. But it's always great chatting, Beth. Maybe we'll just go over one more thing that you would go over with your clients, non-addicts. Would there be any other big point that you would touch on? Boundaries.
Setting boundaries, listening to themselves, finding out their needs. Oh yeah, it's going through the vocabulary. I give a lot of examples of shaming, things that are considered shaming, things that project guilt onto an individual, ways in which people can manipulate that. Again, people that are not hardwired by nature to do that, they need to learn that. They need for their own protection. I go back to this book of People of Why. I remember this book being recommended to me, and they even give you a forewarning at the beginning of the book that this is going to be really challenging to read. Because
Right.
I had what I was trying handle with care. I even underlined that because I had to wrap my head around what I was trying to do was understand the mind of an addict. I wanted to understand. Again, I come from a non-judgmental point. I just want to understand it from a psychological standpoint. But I couldn't even wrap my head around some of the stories that are in there on the manipulation that goes on. And it's not from being naive or living in a sheltered life. It's just, the more brilliant and intelligent they are, it's
The more
amazing what they
intricate
can
it can
get
get.
away with. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's training them to pay attention to when they're being fed toxic shame. You know, that it's okay to feel guilty. That's healthy. But if you start feeling shame and it's not warranted,
Mhm.
that's not right. Another good book I read was Healing the Shame That Binds. Outstanding John Bradshaw. He's got a number of great books. But, you have to learn about shaming. Some of that stems from, depending in the United States of where you grew up, or what religion you are. But some of that can be learned in church. That's how deep rooted that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wasn't raised Catholic, thank God, but my friends that are recovering Catholics, I hear these horror stories
Mhm.
and how they were shamed and guilty and put the God of fear in them
Right.
to the
For
point that
sure.
it's just toxic. So
What?
yeah, what I do is I sit and I teach them. They give me examples, and I'll literally turn back around and explain them exactly how they were just the wolves put over, how they were
Right.
how they were snowed.
Right.
And then I'll show them the patterns. I write them out. I'm big on writing things out because, again, I'm big on having that roadmap
Yeah.
goal for them, so that they can take that with them and reread and process it. 'Cause it takes a while. It's one thing, you're listening to me right now, but later today, maybe even tomorrow, this conversation will go through the back of your mind again
Mhm.
because it's important to you. It really
Yeah.
resonates.
Yeah.
So it takes time to process. You're
Oh
human
yeah.
being.
100%.
It's like digesting food. You need
Yeah.
time to process. So that's the other thing, is that, and that's part of one of my favorite parts. It's really just digging in to each individual's case and figuring out where the manipulation is and teaching them to be
Mhm.
on alert about it. So again, it goes back to establishing those boundaries and ultimately protecting yourself.
Mhm.
You know,
That makes a lot of sense.
as a child
Um.
growing up, I wasn't taught to necessarily protect myself, aside from don't fall down and scratch my knees and bang myself up when I was playing
Mhm.
soccer or whatever sport outside. I was taught to physically protect myself from getting injured, but there's
Mhm.
a whole other level of protecting yourself. Children just aren't taught.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Don't talk to strangers is not enough.
Yeah.
That stranger danger that you teach children, that's not.
100%. Um. I think we'll end it there for today, Beth. I think this was a lot of valuable information um, to give out, and I think
It's heavy, I get it, but when you take time to actually do the work,
yeah.
um, I mean, life is just literally so much better. You're not carrying that. When you go to an airport, the baggage claim, you take your bag. You don't pick up someone else's.
Mhm.
So that's the same thing I look at for someone, that poor soul that's struggling with addiction. It's a shame, but I'm not at the baggage claim going to pick up their bag.
Yeah.
I'm just going to pick up my one little bag that I neatly, packed everything in that's light so that I can carry on with my trip.
Mhm.
Not carrying that around.
Yes,
It's a strong analogy, but it's a powerful.
it is for sure. Um, Thanks so much for coming on again today. It was great chatting. It's always great chatting.
And I'll
And
send you links to the books for viewers, just because they are really powerful. I mean, these are things that you read. I have post-it notes in them, and then you go back to. They're one of those things that you just kind of want to go back to. So it's heavy stuff, but you want to process. But it's so, once you understand it, it's so powerful.
that's awesome. Thanks so much, Beth. We'll chat again soon.
Okay, take care.